Germany. Wow, you're up late. Thank you for joining us in Germany. We got Canada, Minnesota, El Paso, Singapore, Long Island, Ohio, Minneapolis. I'm reminded of that song that, well, in the United States, when you're in like third grade, you learn that song about, Alabama, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Connecticut. I'll stop there. But looks like we got like people from all over the United States here. Hello, Kathy from Jersey, Jersey boy. Cabo. Now that is not fair, Faith. Cabo is, I have people, friends of mine just went there and they sent me pictures and I'm just like, God, to be kidding me. All right, we'll just give it another minute or two. Hello, New Zealand. Hello, upstate New York. Hello, Melbourne. I know Melbourne really well, Catherine. And we have schools throughout Australia using our program. In Bendigo, one of our top ruler schools is in Bendigo. All right, let's give it another 30 seconds and we're going to begin. It's funny, we got from Dr. Carla coming from the Bronx and we got Julie coming from Los Angeles. We got like, and everybody in the middle. Mazatlan. Sounds great. That's cool, Catherine. Your daughter goes to a ruler school in Australia, in Melbourne. We work with the King David School. We work with a bunch of schools in Melbourne. Torak. I have to tell you, I usually stay in a town called South Yarra. Do you know that? It's a cute hotel, my coffee shop, and my poached eggs, avocado. It's a good life in Australia. Okay, so we're going to begin. Good evening, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever. This is day 2, and our focus tonight is going to be on chapters 2 and 3. Now, one thing that I want to say up front is that, oftentimes people are quite reticent in the book clubs. And my goal is for you not to be reticent, which means I want you to be inquisitive, ask difficult questions, because that's what's going to make this fun. Many of you probably have heard me speak before. You've obviously read the book. And so you know what I think. So now let's push each other to go a little bit deeper into the content, questions about the science, and whatever comes to mind. Okay, is that a good kind of agreement to have, that we're going to push ourselves to take this one step deeper than we ever might have before? And Nishka already has a question. And guess what, Nishka? That's going to be one of the topics today. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, but I can't share it yet because it's going to show you a cheat sheet. Okay. Okay. So, permiso para sentir, permission to feel. I just got my book in Polish this week, which is really cool. So far, we've got English, Spanish, German, Romanian, Lithuanian, Portuguese, Korean, Polish this week, and another 12 or so. Chinese coming out in the next couple of weeks. Super cool. I want to encourage all of you to kind of share that the hashtag for this book club is permission to feel. And obviously, if you use Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, please share some of the insights that you have tonight with other people. One thing I wanted to share with you is kind of the vision of the center. So you don't know a lot about maybe the Center for Emotional Intelligence. And I had the honor when Peter Salovey, who is one of the co-founders of the theory of emotional intelligence, became president of Yale University. We decided to open up the Center for Emotional Intelligence. And we created a vision for that work. And the vision is to use the power of emotions to do 4 big things: to create a healthier society. How many of you believe that we could like enhance mental and physical health in our society, in our world right now? What do you think? Everybody's raising their hand. So to create a healthier, more equitable, I think this year, more than any other year that I've been in psychology or in training of schools, the issue, the important issue of equity has come up in terms of, does everyone have equal permission to feel? Do we all have the permission to be our true, full feeling selves? And that comes in many forms, right? It comes from power. There's power structures in our world that interfere with people being their true, full feeling selves. There are cultural differences that can help or potentially hinder. There are racial differences, as we know all too clearly. A couple of days ago marked the 1-year anniversary of the terrible death of George Floyd in our society, in our country here. There are gender differences. There are just so many interesting yet unfortunate reasons why not all of us have equal permission to be our true, full feeling selves. So one of the goals is for all of you to help become those emotion revolutionaries who are making a difference. Innovation. How many of you value innovation? Everybody better raise their hand. Right? Creativity. As someone who has spent his career working with people with very high cognitive abilities, I've always wondered, why is it that not everybody's successful? Because just to give you some background on myself, I was a C&D student growing up in Clifton, New Jersey. Many of you know my story. I had trauma in my childhood and terrible bullying growing up. And I was a terrible student. I had learning challenges. I test anxiety. I had self-esteem issues. The list goes on. Anyway, not bad student, low performing. And I never even knew what it meant to be someone who went to Yale or worked at Yale. And now I have the honor of being a professor there for over 18 years. And I just assumed, that all these rock star, superstar students, if you get into a place like Yale, you're automatically like successful because, my goodness, between your grades and your test scores and your extracurriculars. But the truth is, not everybody's successful. And so one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is, why might that be the case? What is the link between emotions and creativity? And then finally, and probably right now, top of everyone's mind is compassion. How many of you feel like we could use a little bit more compassion in our society, in our world, after the last couple of years? Yeah. And so here we go. But of course, if you know me, and you know me well, we're not going to go anywhere until we check in with our feelings. So everyone, on the count of 1, how are you doing tonight? What color are you in this evening? We got some yellow, exhaustion, green, a lot of greens, pale green, yellow, excited. Can we get specific here with like the feeling word? Green, virgin yellow, relaxed, hopeful, frustrated, peaceful, inspired. Nice. So last week, at the beginning of our webinar, I asked you all to fill out a survey. And one question on the survey was, how are you feeling? And so I analyzed those data, and I thought it would be interesting for all of you to see what 300 people or more, I think there were 369 people who did the survey, what 369 people across the world, what they said they were feeling that evening. What do you think the number 1 word was? Just here's your first little quiz tonight. What was the number 1 feeling word? Tired, stressed, overwhelmed, anxious. Okay. I knew I had pessimists on this call. The number one word was hopeful. Isn't that cool? Hopeful. Everybody's shocked. By the way, Michelle, how are you doing tonight, by the way?
I'm probably in the yellow. Feeling okay, and
All right, firstly, everyone knows that Michelle and I work together, and but Michelle, like yellow, I'm probably in the yellow, but you're feeling okay.
yeah, you're right. You're right. So let me rephrase. I'm in the green
All right, and
because
you work at the Center for Emotional Intelligence. You know the rules are you can't say fine or okay. So
yes, I'm in the green. I am feeling good. I'm positive, but I have low energy because it's the end of the day and it was a busy day.
okay, all right. I give you permission to be your true, full feeling self. So, what do you think? Hopeful, number one word. I mean, unfortunately, most of the other ones, we got some excitement, we got happiness, but we got frustration, anxiety, overwhelm, got some contentment too. But I have to say, and Mercedes, you've been at these clubs for a long time. You remember when we did this last spring, what was the number one feeling? It was anxiety to like the umpth degree. And so I just want to give you some hope. Hopeful was what you said. Maybe all the people who are hopeful didn't show up today. But it's a good place to be. And also remember something very important, that we are really complex people and don't just feel one feeling at a time, right? When somebody says, how are you feeling? We tend not to say, well, I'm feeling this odd mixture of like hope, frustration, anxiety, despair, contentment, and elation. That would be kind of a little overmuch, a little too much. But we are feeling a lot of emotions. I will tell you right now that I've been feeling anxiety for many years. I've had more anxiety the last year and a half than I've ever had before. Anyone relate to that? And so oftentimes we have these dual feelings. We have feelings that are in the background, like that kind of background of anxiety. And then we got the foreground, which is what we feel like right here, right now in the moment. And that's it. That's an important thing to think about, because as we're trying to help ourselves and help other people, it might be interesting to find out, like, how have you been feeling lately? And how are you feeling right here, right now? Because those two things are interacting throughout the day. Okay. So someone in the opening asked a question. And let's think about this right now. The emotion lexicon. Emotion, feeling, mood, dispositional affect. So here's what's going to happen. Many of you obviously have read the book, but I want to have the opportunity to give someone like an autographed signed copy of the book with like a gold seal or something like that. I don't have one of those, but we'll make it up. Who feels confident, without looking at the book or cheating on Google, that they have kind of they've mastered the psychological difference between an emotion, a feeling, a mood, and dispositional affect? Anyone want to take the chance and come on board? And Michelle will bring you up onto live so we can actually meet each other live. Robin Muscardini, I just gave you an Italian.
Robin, you can speak.
Yes. Hi.
Robin, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So where are you coming from?
I'm in Glen Ellen, California.
Cool. And have we ever met before?
Yes, I've been in the book club before.
Oh goodness. So this is like you're like it's a little bit of cheating, but I'm gonna let you get away with it.
Okay, well, thank you.
All right, so emotion, feeling, mood, dispositional affect.
Okay, so an emotion is like a immediate response.
Yeah.
And then a feeling is like, I would say in my language, like where it leaves you.
Yeah.
But just where it leaves you, like it's like a way of, it's just the way you are at that moment.
Mhm.
And then what it can affect your mood. It's kind of like the weather for today.
Mhm.
And then once that mood is like has a long duration, then it can become part of your disposition, like like a landscape, so to speak.
Nice. All right. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Please make sure you send your address to Michelle just privately so we can get you an autograph book if you'd like one. Thank you. I saw someone else raise their hand. Mark, did you want to come on, Mark? Mark Keller, welcome. You got to take yourself off mute, my friend. Hello? All right, well, if you can get off mute, you can join. If you can't, obviously you can't. Anyone else want to join? Is there not someone else? Michelle, did you find someone else?
Yes, Cindy would like to join.
Cool. Hello, Cindy.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. The basic difference for me in these 4 words is time.
Interesting.
You get
Okay.
triggered with the emotion that turns into a feeling, for a while. A mood can last for a few days or weeks and then months even. And then pretty soon before you know it, that's your personality.
Pretty soon, there's your personality. I like that. Thank you, Cindy. So I think between Robin and Cindy, we've got some good things. We've got like this element of time. We got this element of intensity. Let me give you my definition. Now, I apologize because my definition is going to be like the psychology professor definition, which is going to build upon Robin and Cindy's definition. So an emotion, an automatic, mostly short-lived response to an internal or external stimulus that causes shifts in our thinking, our physiology, our behavior, and it's all rooted in our development and culture. You got to give me some credit for remembering that. Come on, that's like pretty good. All right, so an emotion, an automatic, mostly short-lived response to an internal or external stimulus that causes shifts in thinking, behavior, expression, motivation to behave. That's all entrenched in our development and culture. Okay? So emotions are ephemeral. Think about that for a minute. You're not surprised for 3 hours. That would be really weird. Okay. A feeling. Nothing more than feelings. So feelings have a lot of definitions, but primarily we're going to talk about feelings as our private subjective experiences, and they can even be about emotions. And so someone makes you're angry, you have the emotion of anger, and then you're like, you know what, I don't feel like being around that person, or I don't feel like they're a nice person. It's this kind of visceral kind of, your feelings can be about your emotions, and they're mostly your psychological response to them. All right, your mood. Anyone here ever like wake up irritable? A lot of irritable. That's why you joined the Permission to Feel book club. And so I tend to be that person. I wake up in the morning like, I don't like being with people in the morning. I like to I want to make coffee for myself. I want to be by myself. It's terrible. And so That's a mood. A mood is, it can come after an emotion. Like you can be like, you get into a fight with your partner and you get into the car and you're driving to work and you're like, I can't take it anymore. This is ridiculous. And then all of a sudden you're in a bad mood. So it can be the residue of an emotion. Just like you wake up in the morning, I live in the country now. I have the most beautiful scenery. I look outside and I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got the world on a string. It's sunny out, there's beautiful green. And I'm just like, oh, this is gonna be a great day. So moods, it's not like you're pissed, right? Because pissed is an intensity. That's an emotion as a response to something. Mood is kind of more diffuse, less intense, longer in duration. Good? Dispositional affect. Dispositional affect. So this is where I want to give a little bit more instruction. So it's not, and the time thing is kind of related to this, but it's not really about like a mood becomes your disposition. It's more like we all have personality. Personality. That's what dispositional affect is. And so each of us, for example, I'm a neurotic introvert. Anyone like me around? A neurotic introvert? I worry about why I worry, and I'm not really into like talking about it with other people. It's like a recipe for anxiety. Do you see me? Some of you are like, thank you, Shannon. Thank you, everyone. And truthfully, I remember when I'm like 7 years old, like I think when I was 7, I worried about why I worried. Rennie, you were on the news tonight with the mood meter. That's cool. Thank you. Send us the clip. But I think literally that when I was like 7 or 8 years old, I would like have like meta worrying problems. Like I'd be worrying, then I'd be like, but why are you worrying? What do you think about that? Anyone relate to that? So Abby, it's metacognition or meta emotion. There are meta emotions. We have feelings about our feelings. And that's the example I just gave exactly. So just to be clear, some of you are like the happy-go-lucky, extroverts. There's nothing to judge here. This is just who we are dispositionally. It's our proclivity towards experiencing emotions in a certain way. So extroverts, right, where we get, not we, you get pleasure from being in big places. And so Marelda, you're a happy introvert. That's great. And I'm a pretty happy introvert too, actually. I'm just a little bit more neurotic than maybe you are, which means I'm kind of like a little hypochondriacal. It's all good, right? No judgment in this Permission to Feel book club. So do we have any questions about these four domains? This is like master's degree, definitions from a psychology textbook. The question is like, do you really need to know this? It's kind of interesting, right? But it's not, this is like just making sure you understand it. So what is dispositional affect? I want you to think dispositional affect as your tendency to live in one or more likely one quadrant of the mood meter. Right? You tend to, like, if you like really looked at your mood meter plots over time, you tend to live in one place. That's dispositional affect. Mood can be the result of like someone pisses you off and you just start walking around and you're like, can't take it anymore. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm in a bad mood. The feeling is more this like subjective experience. Like, I don't feel like going to the movies with that person tonight. I just don't, it doesn't rub me the right way. Kind of the gut experience. And then the emotion is that automatic experience. All right, so what are the questions here? Hey, Amy, how are you? Nice to see you. Do each of these feed into the other? Well, emotions can lead to feelings and emotions lead to moods, but dispositional affect is more kind of your baseline, kind of your kind of more biological. So you're asking, can we change our DA? So Suzanne, it's a really good question. Can you change your dispositional affect? The answer is a little bit over a long period of time. A little bit over a long period of time. And truthfully, it's what makes the world an interesting place. And, I don't know if I shared this with you before, probably not because this is only our second session, but a lot of people confuse dispositional affect with emotional intelligence. I did that for most of my life because I was someone who had a difficult childhood and also had, was confused about my sexual orientation. I was bullied, I cried a lot as a kid. I had a lot of strong, unpleasant feelings, because couldn't share what was happening for me. And so I suffered a lot. And it's really interesting the more I think about this, because I really thought that all of my emotions and feelings and moods and dispositional affect, they were who I was, like permanently. Meaning that there was no ability to change, and not to change the affect, my proclivity, but what I didn't understand was that emotional intelligence as a set of skills is separate from completely our personalities. So you can be a neurotic person and be very highly emotionally intelligent. You can be an introvert or an extrovert and be equally emotionally intelligent. And so I think oftentimes we confuse our tendency to feel certain ways with our ability to deal with our emotional lives. And I just want to let you know that that is not the case. And it's very liberating to know that you can be an introvert and extrovert, you can be neurotic or someone who's more even keeled and be equally high or low in emotional intelligence. And so, yes, traumatic events can shift our dispositional affect or shift our behavior, not necessarily our affect all the time. All right. Any questions? Do you all feel like this is cool? I'm gonna get I have that emotion lexicon. You're gonna call your cousin tonight and your grandma and say, I'm gonna give you a quiz. What's the psychological difference between an emotion, a feeling, a mood, and dispositional affect? Now you got something to do at breakfast, lunch, or dinner tomorrow night.
Mark, I think Tracy has a question. She raised her hand.
Sure. Tracy, do you want to come on board?
Okay, great. I wasn't sure if you could hear me. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Thank you.
All right. So since you answered the question, thank you very much. Trauma can change the dispositional baseline. What can we do to repair that?
So it's a really important question, Tracy. And, trauma does many things to us. And so what I would say is that I think the harder piece with trauma is that it changes behavior, right? Because of whatever the experience was. It's probably not going to make, trauma is not going to make someone who is introverted or extroverted not introverted or extroverted, but it's going to change whether that person feels safe or comfortable. And to communicate. And so the healing, what I'll just say right now, comes from relationships. We all know that, right? We are built to be in relationships. And so when you understand that, you realize that, as Amy, I saw your question earlier about like everybody needs an Uncle Marvin. And so we need to be around people who help us to feel safe, comfortable, valued, the basic human needs, to be seen, to be heard, to have agency. So thank you for the question. And obviously the work that we're trying to do is to prevent trauma. But of course, when there is trauma, we want to do everything we can to repair. And most of that is going to come from healthy relationships.
Mark, there was another question.
Yeah.
Donald asked, how does ADHD affect the dispositional effect?
Yeah, good question, Donald. And so it's just a separate concept. You know, I have terrible attention problems. Michelle, you're not allowed to say anything about that. And so I would say that you would consider that to be separate from your dispositional affect. But really interesting question. Okay, so let's all take a nice long inhale and a nice long exhale. So chapter 2. So the question from Grace, no, I just don't like the term emotional quotient because it's not your emotional quotient, it's your emotional intelligence quotient. But that's me being an obsessive, neurotic, detail-oriented psychologist. So what I will say for people out there is that, you know, the laboratory that I was trained in here, there are multiple models of emotional intelligence in the world. There are many, many models. And let's cover that next week. We'll go into the details of like, what's the difference between different models of emotional intelligence? How many of you is that interesting for people to discuss? Yes, so everyone wants to know. Good. So Michelle, would you just please make a note for me that next week when we go into chapter 4, when we start talking about emotional intelligence, we're going to, like there's Goleman's model. Essentially, I'll just tell you now, because I don't want to spend too much time on it. Most models that you've heard about in the real world are what you might call mixed models of emotional intelligence. So for example, people say that emotional intelligence is, my favorite one is I've done these talks in corporate settings, and this one CEO of a major company that you've all heard of, which I can't say, he looked at me and he goes, you know, I know what emotional intelligence is, Dr. Brackett. I'm like, cool. He goes, it's all about charisma. I was like, I'm not sure about that. But then I was in the street of New York City once, and I met this, I was at a, just some crazy event. And this guy came up to me, he's like, oh, you're the director of the Center for Emotional Intelligence? I was like, yeah. He goes, you know something? I made my millions because of my emotional intelligence. I was like, all right, well, fabulous. You can donate to our center. I didn't say that, but I did want to. You're right. I roll, right? So I was like, oy. So none of that is emotional intelligence. And so emotional intelligence is not your personality. It's not whether you're charismatic. It's not whether you are extroverted or introverted, or whether or not you are motivated or inspired. Like those are all competencies and personality traits that are interesting, important, but they're not emotional intelligence. So the way we define it is that emotional intelligence has to do with the way we reason with feelings. So it's got to have emotion in it. It's got to be about the way we process emotions. That's why, as you know from my book, we got RULA, as they say where I live in New England now, not ruler, RULA. recognizing, understanding, labeling, expressing, and regulating emotion. So it's about processing facial expressions, body language. It's about reasoning with my feelings. Am I angry? Am I sad? Am I disappointed? It's about expressing emotions and knowing how to do that in a way that gets our needs met. It's about regulating those strategies that are helpful. Do people see the difference? I want to make sure you get that. Does that resonate with you? So one is more personality based. The other is more skill based. Okay. Any questions about that? Anybody have any questions? What I will tell you, my earlier research career was kind of unpacking all these differences between these different models of emotional intelligence. And what I found was that oftentimes these more popular versions of emotional intelligence, they're really just repackaged personality tests. What I found in one study was that with this self-reported measure of emotional intelligence, it was really about people who thought they were very open, they were outgoing, they were kind and generous, they were not neurotic, and they were very kind of organized. And what I'm here to tell you is that that's not emotional intelligence, that's personality. Our emotional intelligence is the way we kind of deal with our own and other people's emotions. They
Mark,
interact with personality. Yeah, please.
there was a question, Mercedes, I believe, and she said, it seems like emotional intelligence is hard work, and does it get any easier?
No, it's life's work. You know, I mean, it does get a little bit easier, but it's complex. This is so different than traditional skills, you know, like math and science. This is why when people say this is soft skills, I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. These are the hardest skills that we ever have to learn. And the reason why that's the case is that these are skills that come into play, especially when we're activated. Do you ever notice that the way you think you will deal with a problem is not the way you actually deal with the problem once you've been triggered or activated? Yes. And never forget, my colleague Robin, who you'll meet at some point, she and I were teaching a course on leadership and emotional intelligence. And all these students came in from their conflict resolution class. And they all had learned all these different conflict styles and ways to deal with conflict and conflict resolution. And I was teaching them emotional intelligence. And I looked at this one person, it was role playing, and I'm like, you're the worst freaking teacher I've ever met. And the woman freaked out and she ran out of the room. And of course, you know, we helped her and we, you know, fixed, you know, her shock and her fear. But the point that I was trying to make is that that's when you need emotional intelligence. Yes, you're exactly right, Ellen. That's because you can't access your frontal lobe when you're activated, right? You're in that fight or flight freeze mode, not in problem solving mode. However, people with higher emotional intelligence understand that principle and have the ability to downregulate, be more present, strategize. So I see there's a lot of questions about regulation. We're going to cover that in about 2 weeks because that's going to be a whole day on regulation. Okay, so the last thing we're going to talk about today is all of this science of why emotions matter. And let's think about it. We know, and by the way, I call this my money slide, and I call it my money slide because whenever someone argues with me, well, my job is not to talk about feelings, or, you know, this is, you know, this is soft stuff, this is fluff. What I say with more confidence than you can ever imagine is that you just don't know the science. You don't know the science. Emotions are the drivers of our attentional capacity. Here's one provocative question. We pay attention to the things that we're made to care about. We all know, how many of you have ever been bored out of your mind in a class? Like you just cannot, you're like, I cannot take it. Can't, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I can't take it. I can't take it. I've got to get out of here. I just can't do it. Has anyone ever had that experience? Boredom shifts your attention. Simple. And what it does, it's not a bad emotion. Someone just said, is there a good or bad? There is no bad emotion. What boredom does is it says, okay, what's in front of me right now is not engaging. I'm going to bring my brain to a place where I'm engaged. So I'm going to doodle. I'm going to look over there. I'm going to do something else. Now, boredom is an emotion. Boredom is a response to a situation. Like all of a sudden, you're like, the stimuli, not engaging, boom, bored. Does this make sense, everybody? That emotions are the drivers of our attentional capacity. This is why parents and teachers need to be trained in emotional intelligence, because if you don't know these things, you don't realize that you're losing your audience half the time. Decision-making. We know that emotions are behind decision-making. You may have read the study that I did with teachers, where we randomly assigned teachers to be in different mood states. Lo and behold, they gave different grades to their students. Judges in the courts, when they're tired and irritable before lunch, they're harsher in the sentences that they give people. That's crazy. So emotions are directly linked to people's judgments, but here's the trick. It happens outside of conscious awareness. And so the only way to improve that problem is to build self-awareness. You gotta pause. You gotta breathe in. You gotta check in with how you're feeling. And all of a sudden, okay, I'm about to make this judgment about this person's life. Is this based on objective evidence, or is this because I'm in a bad mood because I'm hungry? Relationship quality. Emotions are signals to approach or avoid. Simple. Emotions are signals to approach or avoid. How we feel on the inside, how we see other people drives almost everything. Remember, emotions are contagious. So when I'm in a classroom or in a workplace where people are displaying a lot of stress and anger, I'm going to start experiencing that anger. It's going to affect the quality of my relationship with that person. Physical and mental health. Here's an example of a study. The culture and climate of an organization leads to your own stress levels. I mean, anyone here ever work in a place where it was like, oh my goodness, I don't want to go to work. I can't take it. It's so uncomfortable. And how many of you, when you felt that way, when you woke up in the morning, said to yourself something like, gosh, this is going to be a great day at work. To yourself, I want to pull my hair out. I want to go back to bed. I'm going to look on Facebook. I'm going to go into the job market. But what we know from the research is that how you feel about your work affects your individual feelings, and literally that affects your physical health. We did one study where we showed that it affected people's body mass index, which is your body fat. So for those of you who say emotions don't matter at work, I'm here to tell you that how your workplace feels affects your physical health. Finally, performance and creativity. As we say in our center, emotions are the fuel of creativity, but our emotional intelligence determines whether or not that creative process becomes a product. One of my colleagues has shown in research that most creative people don't achieve their outcomes of creativity because they can't deal with feelings. It's the frustration with the project, and the frustration is what diminishes the creativity because they don't have the strategies to deal with the frustration. I mean, how many of you have ever known someone who you saw them and you're like, I know you have all of the potential in the world, but somehow or another that person couldn't get out of their way or get out of their own way. Cute, Chelsea. I'm gonna at the end of our book club, I'm gonna post all these different studies for you so you can have the actual resources. So we're actually over time. Cannot believe this. I'm gonna spend 2 more minutes. Any questions about the science of why emotions matter? Mikhail has tried to raise her hand a number of times. Meek, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. So would you like to come on? Hello.
Yeah, hi, Mark. Thanks.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Great to meet you. I was just wondering that in terms of the science, I wanted to understand the anatomy. So do you consider emotions to be a subset of mental health, or do you consider it a separate faculty or dimension of human health and the self that's complementary to the mind or mental health?
So I think it's a really good question. Probably we need like 3 hours to talk about this over a glass of wine. But
what time are you free?
Yeah. And so like our mental health is comprised of many things, right? Our emotional well-being, our social well-being, whether or not we feel we have purpose and meaning in life. And so I would say that your emotional life is one component of your mental health, but there are many other components that are, important, and they're all inextricably linked, right? And so our social and emotional lives, you just can't separate them really. But really, really good question.
Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, everybody, it's time for us to take a nice long inhale and an exhale. And an inhale. And an exhale. So I'm going to ask you as we wrap up our time together tonight, if you were to go on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, or you were going to call your grandma, or now have dinner with your significant other, your dog, your friend, what's your take home from tonight? What is your take home? What's your little piece that you're going to think about over the next week? That emotions matter and matter. I feel, therefore I am. Emotions are contagious. Here's the thing about emotional contagion. A stressed out teacher is a stressed out classroom, but the kids don't even know they're stressed out because of the teacher. Think about the implications for that. Emotions tell you to approach or avoid. Emotions are information. Be curious. Awesome. So on that note, I'm going to give you all homework. Your homework this week is to pay attention to your emotions. Remember what I said is that our emotions can either enhance or hinder our performance or success. They subconsciously oftentimes affect judgments. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is check in more frequently. Don't just think about how am I feeling today. Think about the transitions between like morning, afternoon, evening. And what I'd like you to do is just take that breath and say, how am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? And just notice if by attributing your feeling to what its actual cause is, makes a difference. And on that note, I want you to have a great, in the United States, we celebrate Memorial Day weekend. It's a 3-day vacation for most people. Please have a wonderful break wherever you are. It's the weekend coming up for most people. Take some time to yourself, take that walk in nature, breathe in and breathe out. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you, Michelle.